Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another awesome podcast where it's a sign at your one-stop shop for anything strange, impossible, and even improbable.
Yeah, and it's 2023, so yeah, this is our second new year we've had with the podcast.
Really cool.
Yeah, didn't think about that till just now, but we started it like mid-2021, so...
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Been going a while. If you want to
really
check
cool.
out the archives,
Good job,
guys.
us. Good commitment.
Yeah. Go check out the old episodes if you're enjoying this. We only have a few episodes up on YouTube because we started the visual way later, but if you would like to hear any of the other podcasts, they're all up on any audio platform like Apple Podcasts,
Spotify. Everything.
Yeah.
So, for this episode, grab your hats and
More
your
investigating.
boots because we're going on another Indiana Jones style adventure deep down into the earth to explore mythical and very real hidden cities.
I'm down.
You down to go down under?
Yeah.
All right then, let's dive in, hey? Bam. All right. So, underground cities. We kind of it kind of is inspired a little bit by the Ancient Apocalypse video. We just saw, that underground city, and I thought it was really cool. And I was like, God, are there any more underground cities that are lesser known?
Yeah. If people don't know what that is, that was the Netflix series by Graham Hancock, which was called Ancient Apocalypse, and it was an epic series. We highly recommend it.
Yeah.
If you like the sort of stuff we talk about here, then you are gonna love that series.
Yeah. And a little preview towards the end of the episode, after we've kind of covered some of the underground cities, we are going to go and explore Graham Hancock's theory, as well as some other native stories to explore why did these people build such vast underground cities in the first place?
Yeah, that is a good question.
Yeah. So, starting us off, basically, for thousands of years, humans, have been building underground cities. And the reasons are unclear to scholars and archaeologists. They have their theories, but they're kind of weak and can fall apart quite easily. But ancient cultures around the globe decided to escape from the surface of our planet and seek shelter deep within the earth. And somehow ancient cultures not only managed to survive, but thrive and create incredible underground cities that feature many rooms, living quarters, religious centers, underground farms, and shelters. And it's quite incredible. As a human nowadays, my connection to sunlight and to wanting to be above ground is quite high,
Yeah.
If we have long bouts of raininess or darkness, I can feel a shift in my mood. And, for people who live in, some people love the rain and the cold, but for me, just the sun and the outdoors is something that really gives me a lot of joy.
Yeah,
and I
think
think
a lot of people have seasonal depression, so like that, their depression is triggered when the days start to get darker and gloomier.
Yeah.
It's hard to even imagine a life where you're spending most of it underground.
Exactly. It's like, okay, so there's having rainy days, but then there's what about an entire culture that doesn't see the outside world, the surface?
Yeah. And what do they do about vitamin D deficiency?
Yeah. It's very strange
like,
to kind
honestly.
of... Who knows? Maybe they live less. Or they had they had farms. How did they have farms? That's a crazy question. How were they growing stuff?
Yeah. Do you dive into that?
No. But Yeah, should definitely.
And as they had like some kind of artificial light, like indoor growing.
Yeah, who knows? And yeah, it's quite hard to imagine. I think even our ancient progenitors would need some big reason to move an entire culture, all their civilization underground. It's a big move, and it takes a lot of energy, resources, planning, structural development, architecture. It takes a lot of engineering and, will to move underground or to start living underground. And there had to have been some sort of big reason. And we're going to start to get to that reason towards the end. But for right now, let's dive into our first underground city. And I really tried to go and for the first couple search for some that were not very known.
Okay,
so the first one is the underground city in the Grand Canyon. And this was documented in 1909. And I've got this article, and it was given to them by this explorer who stumbled upon it by accident. And we will kind of get into this person's story and what happened after that. But yeah, so what is now regarded by scientists as not only the oldest archaeological discovery in the United States, but perhaps one of the most valuable in the world, which was mentioned some time ago in the Gazette, which is a popular newspaper, and was brought to the city by G.E. Kincaid, the explorer who found the great underground citadel of the Grand Canyon during a trip from Green River, Wyoming, down the Colorado River in a wooden boat to Yuma. And this was in 1909. We have newspaper clippings of his exploration in the Grand Canyon. So according to the story in the Gazette by Mr. Kincaid, the archaeologists of the Smithsonian Institute, which was financing his explorations, have made discoveries which almost conclusively prove that the race which inhabited this mysterious cavern, hewn in solid rock by human hands, was of Oriental origin, or possibly from Egypt, tracing back to Ramses, which was a pharaoh. And if their theories are born out of the translations of the tablets engraved within the hieroglyphics found in this underground city, the mystery of the prehistoric peoples of North America, their arts, and who they were will probably shed a whole new light on history. So Egypt and the Nile in Arizona and Colorado will be linked by a historical chain running back to ages which staggers the wildest fancy of the fictionist. So, through a thorough investigation under the direction of Professor S.A. Jordan, the Smithsonian Institute is now prosecuting the most thorough explorations, which will be continued until the last link in the chain has been forged. Nearly a mile underground, about 1,400 feet below the surface, a long main passage has been found and delved into. And beyond that passage, they found a mammoth chamber from which radiates scores of passageways like the spokes of a wheel. There were several hundred rooms, and they were reached by passageways running from the main passage, one of them having been explored for 854 feet and another for 634 feet. The recent find includes articles which have never been known as native to this country, and doubtless they had their origin in the Orient. War weapons, copper instruments, sharp-edged and hard as steel indicate the high state of civilization reached by the people living within this city. So the scientists wanted to dive into what was going on here, and they created a force of around 30 to 40 people before going further into the cavern. They needed lighting, they needed their tools, and they needed a bunch of stuff to be able to penetrate, the thick walls and the dark light. So according to Mr. Kincaid's report, he was navigating down the Colorado River and he found this like sheer rock face and a small tiny opening in the rock. And he said the entrance is almost 1,486 feet down, and the cavern was almost inaccessible. And it was that far down a sheer canyon wall. He said it's located on government land and no visitor will be allowed there under penalty of trespass. The scientists who investigated wished to work without, here he says unmolested, which is kind of an old term.
Yeah.
Without fear of the archaeological discoveries being disturbed by curio or relic hunters. And he says a trip there would be fruitless and the visitors would be sent on their way. But this is the story about how he found the cavern. This is his personal account, all right? So he says, I was journeying down the Colorado River in a boat, alone, looking for mineral. Some 42 miles up the river from El Tovar Crystal Canyon, I saw on the east wall stains in the sedimentary formation about 2,000 feet above the riverbed. There was no trail at this point, but I finally reached it with great difficulty. Above a shelf which hid it from view of the river was the mouth of the cave. There are steps leading from this entrance some 30 yards from what was at the time the cavern. The cavern was inhabited the level of the river. When I saw the chisel marks on the wall inside the entrance, I became interested, secured my gun, and went in. During that trip, I went back several hundred feet along the main passage till I came to the main crypt in which I discovered the mummies.
Ooh.
One of these I stood up and photographed by flashlight. I gathered a number of relics which I carried down the Colorado to Yuma, from whence I shipped them to Washington with details of the discovery. Following this, the explorations were undertaken. Now they go into the passages within this underground city. The main passage is about 12 feet wide, narrowing to 9 feet toward the farther end. About 57 feet from the entrance, the first passages branch off to the right and left, along which on both sides are a number of rooms about the size of ordinary living rooms today, though some are 30 to 40 feet squared. These are entered by oval-shaped doors and are ventilated by round air spaces through the walls into the passages. The walls are about 3 feet 6 inches in thickness. The passages are chiseled or hewn as straight as could be laid out by any engineer. The ceilings of many of the rooms converge to a center. The side passages near the entrance run at a sharp angle from the main hall, but towards the rear they gradually reach a right angle in direction. And over 100 feet from the entrance is a cross hall, several hundred feet long, in which was found an idol. The people's god sitting cross-legged with a lotus, flower, or lily in each hand. The cast of the face in the carving shows a skillful hand, and the entire is remarkably well preserved, as is everything in the cavern. The idol most resembles Buddha, though the scientists are not certain as to what religious worship it represents. Taking into consideration everything found thus far, it is possible that the worship most resembles the ancient people of Tibet. Surrounding this idol are smaller images, some beautiful in form, other crooked, naked, and distorted shapes, symbolic probably of good and evil. There are 2 large cacti with protruding arms, one on each side of the dais on which the god squats. All of this is carved out of hard rock resembling marble. And I wonder what the purpose of the cactus is. Maybe it's some sort of like psychedelic thing.
Possibly.
Because especially the native peoples of America, they have peyote, which is derived from a cactus.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah. So I wonder if it's like a symbol of like...
So this was basically chiseled, or like it sounds like it was like chiseled out of a mountain. right?
Yeah, so it's in the Grand Canyon.
But it's not in the ground, underground.
It's in the Grand Canyon, and he said the cavern was like 1,400 feet
So there's steps
from the
down.
entrance. Yeah, so there was an entrance in sheer rock face within the canyon, and I think the Grand Canyon, I'm not sure how it was formed, but it's these big canyons with all these passages going through it, right?
Yeah.
The Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he said that it was 1,400 feet down from the entrance, which was in the sheer rock face of the canyon below.
So it would be built out of it's like chiseled out of the rock that's already there, right?
Yeah.
That's just so crazy, because how much energy and time does that take to build? Like, what the hell? It's like hard to even imagine.
Yeah, and there's some really incredible things like in India where these like huge monuments have been chiseled out of the rock that was already there.
It's hard to believe
temples.
It was done by hand though, because we're talking about times before they would have had tools, right, to do this stuff, like mechanical tools.
I know.
It's really hard to imagine.
Yeah.
Especially when you're like, penetrating the rock like that. You're not just like building from
Especially
the
if
ground.
it's as hard as marble, imagine how long it takes to sculpt like, a sculpture out of marble and then to sculpt a whole city.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
Yeah. So in the opposite corner of the cross hall, where the Buddha-looking kind of idol was found, were tools of all descriptions made of copper. These people undoubtedly knew the lost art of hardening this metal, which has been sought by chemists for centuries without results. On a bench running around the workroom was some charcoal and other material used in the process. There is also slag and stuff similar to matte, showing that these people smelted ores. But so far no trace of where or how this was done has been discovered, nor the origin of the ore. Among other finds are vases or urns and cups of copper and gold made very artistic in design, and the pottery includes enameled ware and glazed vessels. Another passageway leads to granaries such as are found in the Oriental temples. They contain seeds of various kinds, and one very large storehouse has not been entered, as it is 12 feet high and can be reached only from above. 2 copper hooks extend on the edge, which indicates that some sort of ladder was attached. These granaries are rounded, and the material of which they are constructed is a hard cement sort of material. So they must have been constructing that too. And what's very interesting is that on all the urns, on the walls over the doorways, and tablets of stone which were found by the image are mysterious hieroglyphics, the key to which the Smithsonian Institute hopes yet to discover. These writings resemble those found on the rocks about the valley. The engraving on the tablets probably has something to do with the religion of the people, and similar hieroglyphics have been found in the peninsula of the Yucatan, but these are not found in the Orient. Some believe that these cave dwellers built the old canals in the Salt River Valley, and among the pictorial writings only 2 animals are found. One is of prehistoric type. So could that suggest that they were living a long, long time ago?
Definitely, right? Otherwise, how do you get that?
Yeah.
Well, like, I guess there's ways, but...
Yeah, so they also found this tomb, and basically he called it the crypt. There were urns and mummies, but no children or females were buried there. And he said that this led him to believe that the interior section was the warriors' barrack or something along those lines. There were no animals, no clothing, no bedding, and
in the whole place, or just this room?
Yeah, no bones of animals, nothing.
In the whole place?
That they've searched, yeah.
It is strange, like, no bedding, no, like how you think of our houses, like if it was sort of just left, right? There would be, especially because it's protected from weathering and stuff, there's there's items all over that can be found. So it makes you think, were they living in these places? Because you would surely find that you'd have a kitchen area.
Well, just we're about to get into, they did find what they thought was a dining hall because there were cooking utensils there.
Okay. Like sign of fire and cooking.
Yeah. And he says that upwards of 50,000 people could have lived in the cavern comfortably.
What the hell?
And when we begin to look at some of the underground cities, you see that that's not so uncommon, that these many people were actually living underground. And if you think just like going to a mall, there's not that many people in a mall at once, and it can be so crowded, you know?
Yeah.
Feels so crowded, so I wonder what it felt like for these people. Yeah. There's a lot more that they found, but I want to go on to this Native American legend that possibly has a connection with this underground city. So the Hopis, in the Hopi tradition, it is told that their ancestors once lived in an underworld in the Grand Canyon till dissension arose between the good and the bad, the people of one heart, the people of two hearts. Manchato, who is their chief, counseled them to leave the underworld, but there was no way out. The chief then caused a tree to grow up and pierce the roof of the underworld, and then the people of one heart climbed out. They tarried by Palcival, which is the Red River, or the Colorado River, and grew grain and corn. They sent a message to the Temple of the Sun, asking the blessing of peace, goodwill, and rain for the people of one heart. That messenger never returned, but today at the Hopi village at sundown, it said it can be seen that the old men of the tribe, out of the housetops, gazing towards the sun, looking for the messenger. When he returns, their land and ancient dwelling place will be restored to them, and that is their tradition. Among the engravings of animals in the cave is seen an image of a heart over the spot where it is located. The legend was learned by W.E. Rowlands, the artist, during a year spent with the Hopi Native Americans. There are two theories of the origins of the Egyptians, though. One is that they came from Asia. Another is that the racial cradle was in the Upper Nile region, and herein an Egyptologist believed in the Indian origins of the Egyptians, like the Native Americans. So, who knows, perhaps the the Egyptians came from there, brought their hieroglyphics and that knowledge with them. Who knows?
Possibly.
Yeah, but the Smithsonian has since all these findings and images and stories were published back in 1909, have started to begin to deny that this ever happened, and it's pointing to perhaps that there was a big cover-up, because what we saw from the Smithsonian in the Giants episode was that they covered up a lot of the skeletal remains that were found. So,
and originally you said, like, when he found the entrance, that it was on government property, which you'd be like penalized for going on. So it seems to be a bit of a theme here that the government seem to like claim ownership over a lot of these sort of places where we can discover things about our past that doesn't go with the narrative that we've been taught.
Yeah. And since then, it's kind of been suppressed for over 100 years, which is why the story is not very well known.
And it's such a shame because, like, it's obviously huge.
Yeah.
There's obviously so much to be explored, and again, it's just been cut off from us and hidden. And it has to be because it's going to show that there was some kind of an advanced civilization when there shouldn't have been.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I think the theme is on a lot of the things we look into on this show. You know, we're just getting these little like breadcrumbs and inklings of stuff because it's been so suppressed and hidden from us.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was really fascinating, and I had not heard of it before either.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it either, and I've never heard of this next one too. And I love like ancient Egyptian stuff. And this is the Lost Labyrinth of Ancient Egypt. And so basically, whoever found this, they said that for anyone who put together the buildings of the Greeks and displayed their labors, they would seem lesser in both effort and expense to this labyrinth. Even the pyramids are beyond words, and each was equal to many and mighty works of the Greeks, yet the labyrinth surpasses even the pyramids. So it's a huge structure that's they're saying is even grander than the pyramids of Giza. And so this was found and documented a long time ago, and it was first found by Herodotus and written in the 5th century BC, describing a colossal temple said to contain 3,000 rooms full of hieroglyphics and paintings. And it was named the Labyrinth by the Greeks after the complex maze of corridors designed by Daedalus for King Minos of Crete. And that's where the legendary Minotaur dwelt. So they had their stories of the labyrinth. And they described this place as a labyrinth, not because it was a labyrinth, but perhaps because it was so hard to navigate. Yeah. And it was easy to get lost in. So that was the first known documentation of it. And the Egyptian labyrinth became lost to the pages of history for a long time. Until
Where
recently.
Where is it located in Egypt? Like near the other famous pyramids?
We'll get into, because they lost it for a long time, and then towards the end we've realized
it actually lost its location.
Yeah, and then they've recently found it.
Okay.
And we'll get into where it is once we get to there.
That's crazy.
So Herodotus was not the only historian to describe the labyrinth of ancient Egypt. The massive temple complex was described by many authors, including Manetho Aegyptiaca in the 3rd century BC, Diodorus Siculus in the 1st century BC, Strabo in 64 BC to 1980, Pliny in 79 AD, and Pomponius Mela in 43 AD. And at least 2 of whom claim to have seen the labyrinth firsthand. Others were reporting on accounts of the labyrinth. So Herodotus was the first to describe the labyrinth of Egypt in the 2nd book of his history, and he gave the following account. It has 12 courts covered in, with gates facing one another, 6 upon the north side and 6 upon the south, joining on one to another. And the same wall surrounds them all outside, and that are in the... Sorry, okay, I'll stop.
I was wondering, how long are you going to keep that up? I bet you can't.
And there are in it 2 kinds of chambers, the one kind below the ground, and the other above upon these. 3,000 in number, of each kind 1,500 square feet. The upper set of chambers we saw ourselves, but the chambers underground we only heard about. For the passages through the chambers and the goings this way and that way through the courts, which were admirably adorned, afford endless matter for marvel. As we went through from a court to the chambers beyond it, and from the chambers to colonnades, and from the colonnades to other rooms, and then from the chambers again to the other courts. Over the whole of these is a roof made of stone like the walls, and the walls are covered with figures carved upon them, each court being surrounded with pillars of white stone fitted together most perfectly. And at the end of the labyrinth, by the corner of it, there is a pyramid of 40 fathoms, upon which large figures are carved. Into this there is a way made underground. Such is this labyrinth. A big underground pyramid. So, yeah, here is a picture of a depiction of this underground network of passages that is found here. And it's quite cool, really. Looks like how we're going to be designing our garden beds. I'll put the picture up. But yeah, so there's all these different squares of geometrically designed areas underground here. And this is the diagram of the Egyptian labyrinth produced by a 17th century German scholar. So yeah, it is not clear whether the Egyptian temple was described as a labyrinth simply because it was so huge and so complex that one could easily become lost, or whether it was intentionally designed as a maze where one had to find their way through it, maybe through some sort of initiation. Ancient Greek historian Strabo, who also claimed to have visited the temple, wrote in his geography book this: "Before the entrances there lie what may be called a hidden chambers, which are long and many in number, and have paths running through them one another which twist and turn so that no one can enter or leave any court without a guide." So yeah, it makes me think that perhaps this was like you'd send your initiate into it, or maybe it was like just for this group of people who knew how to navigate this, but it seems quite important.
It seems like it could have been set up sort of to hide stuff and like trick people into getting lost in there.
Yeah. So there's a lot of detail about the internal
map of it.
Yeah, the internal description of it. And one of them, from Diodorus Siculus, he says, when one had entered the sacred enclosure, one found a temple surrounded by columns, 40 to each side. Can you imagine? 40 columns going this way, 40 columns going that way, continuously in a row. It's this huge, kind structure.
Of hallways.
No, but it would be like one giant hall with 40 columns, So it would be like 40 rows of columns. So imagine standing in this giant hall and there's these pillars.
Oh, right, yeah.
40
with what way. On? Like something written on them?
He didn't say anything was written on them.
And where is there doorways out of there?
Yeah, there'd be doorways.
Doorways between each column?
No. It's one big room.
Yeah.
With pillars in it.
Okay.
Imagine, this is the room, and there's 40 pillars in the room.
Yeah.
You can walk between the pillars.
And one doorway into it.
Or maybe a couple, who knows. But yeah, it's one big room.
Clearly you lost me at columns.
Yeah, what the heck? You know what a column is? It's like a pillar.
Like a pillar, I know what a pillar is, but a column could be a lot of things.
Yeah, okay. What?
Like...
Corridor? Are getting columns confused with corridors?
No, I was thinking columns is like a shape, right?
Yeah. So... All right, let's move on. Anyway, yeah, so it did get lost to history, but just south of the site of Crocodilopolis, at the entrance to the depression of the Fayum Oasis, sits Hawara, an archaeological site that is home to the pyramid of Amenemhat III, the last king of the 12th dynasty. It is here where William Flinders Petrie made a significant discovery in 1889. Petrie discovered an enormous artificial stone plateau measuring 304 meters by 244 meters, which he interpreted as being the foundation of the labyrinth. He concluded that the labyrinth itself must have been destroyed in antiquity and that all was left was the stone base. And this is map of the archaeological sites in the Fayum showing the locations of Hawara and Crocodilopolis. Because the Greeks came into Egypt, right? And they conquered. And then they kind of changed the name of some of the cities. So Crocodilopolis is one of the Greek names. But Louis de Cordier, researcher and coordinator of the Mataha expedition, questioned Petty's conclusion that the stone slab must have been the foundations. He recalled that many of the classical historians referred to an enormous roof made of stone. Could it be that the large stone base identified by Petry was actually the roof of the labyrinth, and that the entire complex remained hidden beneath it? So in March 2008, after receiving permissions from the Supreme Council of Antiquities of Egypt, headed up at the time by Dr. Zahi Hawass, a team of georadar specialists from the National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics conducted extensive testing in the area. What the surveys revealed could pave the way towards one of the greatest discoveries in ancient Egypt. The scanned area showed strong suggestion of a vast number of chambers and walls several meters thick below the stone slab. So that's this, below this.
Yeah. Which kind of just looks like a mound.
Yeah. And at a depth of 8 to 12 meters, they found a grid structure of gigantic size made of a high resistivity material such as granite. The geophysics research confirmed the presence of archaeological features consistent with the descriptions of the lost labyrinth of Egypt. And here is some of the scanning results from the National Research Institute for Astronomy and Geophysics in Hawara, Egypt. And as you can see here, that there's definitely a maze of corridors and things beneath the structure.
But they haven't been able to get in there.
Unfortunately, just like our previous discovery, there was a suppression of findings.
Oh, great.
So the results were exchanged in a public lecture at Ghent University in October of 2008 in the presence of the Belgian press. However, it was not long after that the Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Egypt put a stop on all communications of the findings due supposedly to Egyptian national security sanctions. Louis de Cordier, expedition lead, waited 2 years for the Supreme Council to make the findings public, but by June 2010 it became clear that they had no intention of doing so. Thus, de Cordier launched his own website, Labyrinth of Egypt, in order to publicly post the results of this significant research project. He hopes that one day excavations can be launched to fully explore this hidden gem, as the results could shed light on one of the greatest mysteries of antiquity and go down as one of the most important discoveries of ancient Egypt. But until then, it will remain unsearched, and we can only rely on the old accounts of history.
And that is quite a common thing that you do hear about, where there's obviously some kind of structure under mounds. Like, there's just thousands of mounds all over the world, and these have been proven to be man-made. I think there's like loads in Wisconsin, and they have done scans on some of these mounds where there's like stuff underneath, structures underneath, but they won't get funded. Like, we can't.
Yeah.
You know, who can afford to do that if you're not being funded?
Yeah.
Right? So we're not finding out probably about tons of these underground cities. They're really frustrating. And especially in Egypt, where, you know, there is so much control over the narrative. And that's something that Hancock goes on about a lot.
Yeah, religious dominancy and like worldviews is a huge like inhibitor in kind of the progress and finding out the truth of what happened in the past, because it may change the course of like what specific narratives are putting out there.
Yeah, and definitely if we're seeing that all over the world, like if we was to discover under even more of these mounds that are all over the world, that there are these underground cities, then we've got a massive part of our history missing, because why would there be a period of time where everybody is retreating underground, and especially all over the world? So what is happening at that time, and what is happening to what is obviously an advanced civilization? Because they wouldn't be able to do this.
And in my research, I can't go into all of them because we only have like certain amount of time, but I found findings of underground cities in Japan, in China, in South America, in the Middle East, in America, which we did go over, but they're everywhere.
Yeah, they are.
They're really everywhere. And for some reason, only a few are truly known. And then even then, the reason for their explanation is unbelievable. It's not believable. It's like kind of vague and just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, because the research hasn't been allowed to be pursued, and it's very restricted. And maybe they've even been like accidentally discovered as well.
Yeah. All right. So moving into the Middle East, there is an ancient underground city called Nusabad, which is now located in modern-day Iran. And the name Nusabad may be translated to mean city of cold, tasty water. And the legend is related to this tale of a Sasanian king. Sasanian is kind of the time period that this is from. Was passing through the area one day when he had a drink of water from a local well and spring. Struck by the refreshing and clean quality of the water he had just drunk, he ordered a city to be built around it. And the king then named the city Nusabad, which meant city of cold, tasty water, which would later become Nusabad. Okay, but why'd you build it underground? The tale says nothing about that, but who knows what that is. It's maybe just people trying to explain something, a reason why the city was built.
Yeah, but then why is it underground exactly?
Yeah, and I'll have pictures of Nusabad. It looks very similar to the next one we're going to go into. And it has a similar explanation, which is a common narrative that comes up with these underground cities, is that it was protection from invaders.
Like a bunker in the wall.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of our modern day take bleeding into the past, and perhaps these bunkers were used to hide from enemies. At the same time, I would think that if you had a bunker and there's only one way in or one way out, which is common in these cities, is that all you'd have to do would locate the entrance to this underground city, and then it would be like a starve them out situation.
Yeah.
Or, you just knock down the stone wall, throw some smoke in there, smoke them all out.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like the most strategic positioning, but maybe it was. Who knows? But that's the common kind of mainstream archaeological interpretation. We're going to kind of challenge that towards the end.
Okay.
But yeah, so Nusabad is very similar. There are ventilation shafts that allow airflow in and out of the city, and fresh water is provided by the spring that runs through it. And so this meant that refugees were able to stay in the underground city for long periods of time, which goes to, they could hold out during a siege, perhaps. It has also been suggested that there would have been some storage areas for food as well, and various rooms have been found along the carved-out pathways of the city, and ledges have been dug out to serve as benches and beds for people. And a lot of pictures here. And Nusabad was abandoned, forgotten, until 1920, when a well was dug under the house of local inhabitants, and they stumbled upon the labyrinth and underground chambers completely by accident.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'd love that to happen to me, or Could you imagine? We're just like digging up something in the garden and you stumble across like an underground city.
I know, that'd be so cool. That would be my dream, honestly.
Yeah.
And there's a very similar story that...
You know, actually, that did kind of happen with my dad's friend.
Really?
But it's like, it's not an underground city, but he bought a property and then found out that there was World War II tunnels on his property.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like underground tunnels. So then he started doing, he set up a business doing tours. Yeah, because he had all, like this amazing, like these tunnels that were like leading and had all, I guess like guns and stuff in there. Yeah, I don't know a lot about World War II, but I was thinking, like, imagine that. It'd be so cool. Like, you don't know it's there, and no one else knew it was there because they sold you the property not knowing it's there, and you're just sort of like, rediscovering this like untouched part of history. Yeah,
really cool. Yeah, I love that. We should start digging. Maybe there's something under that hill outside.
Yeah. We do have our own mini mound.
Yeah. So the story of this like chance encounter is very similar to our next one, and probably one of the most famous underground city. And this is in the Cappadocia region of central Turkey, and it is the city of Derinkuyu, which is what's talked about in the Ancient Apocalypse documentary. And so this region is known for its dynamic landscapes. They have volcanic mountains, soft tufa rock, and many unique rock structures known as fairy chimneys by the locals. And below all of this, the underground cities make up a large network of tunnels and chambers that span for kilometers in each direction. And there isn't just one city in this region. There's dozens that have been found, and all of them are connected to one another in a network, which is very, very interesting. So as of 2022, dozens of underground cities have been discovered with Derinkuyu being the largest at a depth of 85 meters below ground. Apart from Derinkuyu, some of the key cities within the network are the Tatlarin underground city, which is one of the oldest known subterranean cities in the areas, the Ozluce underground city, the Mazi underground city, and the Kamikli underground city. And they're all within 6 to 20 kilometers of one another, connected in different tunnel systems. And that being said, though, a recent systematic survey of the region with seismic tomography utilized 33 measurements to estimate that the entire network was larger than 450,000 square meters and reached depths of up to 113 meters. So if this information is accurate, it would suggest that there are cities that are much larger than Derinkuyu that are still yet to be found. Wow. So here is a little kind of pictorial depiction of Derinkuyu and the entire world reaching around 85 meters, which is 279 feet into the earth. And you can see this network of labyrinth-like tunnels that remind me a lot of like an ant hill.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
The network of ants. And it was lost to history until 1963 when a man accidentally discovered a tunnel behind one of the walls of his house.
What the hell?
Yeah, so the underground city is actually 18 stories deep with wells, chapels, stables, schools, and more, and is said to have been able to accommodate up to 20,000 people. So it's really huge. Yeah, it is believed that more than 600 entrances to the city exist, most of them hidden to the vast underground city, which covered 445 kilometers squared. That's huge.
Yeah, 600
what the hell?
Entrances.
445 kilometers squared. That's a huge chunk of space. Take a long time to drive across that. Yeah. Stables, apartments, communal rooms, chapels, tombs, wine and oil presses, and the passageways are secured by 1,000-pound stone doors that could only be opened from the inside. Interesting. Okay, so that adds some merit to the mainstream archaeological thing, which is that they were used for sieges. If it can only be opened from the inside, but I don't see how. So in the interest of added security, each level could be isolated from others, even though all levels were able to access one another. Those living on the bottom levels were able to cut off the water supply to the upper and ground levels, preventing enemies from poisoning the supply. That's so smart, though.
Yeah.
The tunnels could be blocked from the inside with round rolling stone doors, and the passageways themselves were narrow to force any invader to line up one at a time. That's the theory.
You have water, but how do you have food if you've locked yourself down in the bottom?
Yeah. So the big question really is who built the underground city of Derinkuyu? And until recently, the origin and purpose of the city were unknown. According to the Turkish Department of Culture, the city was built 2,800 years ago in the 8th century BC by the Indo-European Phrygians. It was later enlarged during the Byzantine era, probably the Christians, whom historians believe used it as a hiding place to avoid persecution. The church that exists in the lowest floor may verify this theory. So it's showing that there have been multiple additions to it. And many different people have used this city. Some claim that the underground city was built by Anatolian Hittites in the 15th century BC in order to flee enemies. Others have hypothesized that the underground city was created during the Younger Dryas event about 14,500 years ago, when a comet broke apart, sending segments exploding within the Earth's atmosphere, throwing dust and soot into the atmosphere and blotting the sun out for months, causing temperatures to drop and plunging the world into an ice age.
Yeah, that's like another more kind of believable theory. Is it could have been some kind of big impact on the world where you had no choice because of some kind of natural disaster but to retreat underground.
Yeah. And the theory posits that these underground cities would have been created at the same time as Göbekli Tepe, just 600 kilometers to the east of Derinkuyu. So that's very close by, considering Derinkuyu itself is 470 kilometers long, And
could it be that people at this time, they were very in tune with the stars, they had oracles and seers? Could they have foreseen these events coming and prepared beforehand? I wouldn't put that past them either.
Yeah. Because the original builders must have had a compelling reason to pull off such an audacious feat, as we were talking about. And no one truly knows why. Everything is a lot of speculation. One thing that archaeologists are having trouble with is actually dating when it was built. All they can date right now is the pottery and stuff that they found inside it. So
that's difficult because just like you said, it could be hundreds and thousands of years later that other people occupy the space and then they brought in their pottery.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to carbon date the stone around it, and that's what archaeologists are having trouble with. They're getting a varying degree of dating on the stone, and so all they can really do is actually date the items within it. So that doesn't fully point to when it was made. We can only say when the items within it were made.
Yeah.
And this brings us to the last final theory about why were these people living under the ground, and we can begin to trace it through the Zoroastrian texts of ancient Persia, underground cities, and what they reveal about an ancient civilization. And this comes directly from Graham Hancock himself.
Okay, awesome.
So Graham Hancock, he investigated a lot of religious texts of the Zoroastrians of ancient Persia. So the Zoroastrians were a group of people who followed Zoroastrianism, which was a type of belief system. And the underground cities of neighboring Turkey. He argues that they are far older than what is being said. And he says that they date back to cataclysmic events near the end of the last ice age and an advanced civilization of prehistory. And as we begin to dive into it, we're going to explore some of what he says through Magician of the Gods and some of his other books, kind of adding some weight to this theory.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, I need to take a drink, so before we start.
Yeah. Like, a lot of people do sort of give Graham a hard time for a lot of his theories, but at least he's bringing, like, different theories to the table. And instead of just, like, you know, the acceptance and of what's already been discovered and said, and not expanding beyond that. Like, I think that's one thing I really admire about him, is he's just, you know, bringing new thought, new ideas. Because, you know, that is what a lot of science is, isn't it, right? You've got to have that open mind to then put the pieces together for that new concept and idea.
Yeah, and so basically what he's saying is that we're just going to kind of summarize it and then kind of go into the evidence that supports this, is that the reason these people moved underground, moved their whole lives underground, developed these really, you know, complex and highly engineered systems of living beneath the earth, was that because there was a cataclysmic event around 12,000 years ago, and this marked the end. This was the end of the Ice Age, the Younger Dryas period, and a comet came and hit the Earth and created so much cataclysm that it created an ice age, submerging the world into a deep frost.
Yeah, oh God.
And so the people moved underground to be able to survive that cataclysm, so that because it was inhospitable above the surface. And we know from just like geothermal heating today in modern day that we can heat an entire house based on the geothermal currents a couple meters below us. So the ground underneath the ground would have been warm and hospitable enough for people to live in when the outside was, you know, deadly.
Yeah.
So we were talking about earlier what would make people want to really move underground and create, you know, thousands of kilometers of underground cities and networks. You know, it wasn't just one people trying to, it was huge undertaking and project that had to go, you know, to occur in order to make this happen. And there definitely had to be something that was life-threatening.
Don't you think, though, like, they would have to know it's coming before it happens?
Yeah.
Because it's like, when that hits and that happens, like, if you're above ground, like, surely your chances of survival are, like, zero.
Yeah, that's what makes me think.
So that's, like, I think maybe why that idea is written out a bit by a lot of scientists and stuff, but they're not, like, thinking about the fact that people back then might have been way more in tune with themselves. You know, we're talking on a spiritual level where they could see this, and they had seers and oracles and foresee that coming, you know.
Yeah,
because they would have to, right? You'd have to be prepared beforehand, because these are such intricate buildings.
Yeah, you need some planning.
You couldn't just do, like,
yeah, you need just to figure out the engineering of how to get airflow, how to do all of this. Surely. You know, you can't just suddenly become a master at building underground. You know, there has to be
especially in those conditions, like deadly conditions.
Exactly. Yeah. So, so we're beginning to trace the origins of Zoroastrians of ancient Persia. Plutarch, for example, tells us that Zoroaster lived 5,000 years ago, before the Trojan War. A similar chronology is given by Diogenes Laertius, who relates that Zoroaster lived 6,000 years ago. More recent scholars have proposed dates as far apart as 1750 BC and also 588 BC. So no one's really sure, but what we can trace is that in the Zoroastrian scriptures, known as the Zend Avesta, certain verses in particular are recognized as drawing on these very ancient oral traditions. The verses speak of a primordial father called Yima, the first man, the first king, and the founder of civilization. And it appears in the opening section of the Zend Avesta known as the Vendidad. There we read how the god Ahura Mazda created the first land, Airavejo, by the good river Data as a paradise on earth, kind of similar to the Garden of Eden. The fair Yima, the great shepherd, was the first mortal with whom Ahura Mazda chose to converse, instructing him to become a preacher. This is kind of a bit of history about the Zoroastrian tradition, and they say that atomically modern humans like ourselves existed, so far as we know, for a little less than 200,000 years, but these guys are trying to say that it's longer. So within this time span, there's only been one period when those parts of the earth that are useful to humans increased dramatically in size. And that was during this last ice age between 100,000 and 11,600 years ago. Previously submerged lands totaling 27 million square kilometers, equivalent to the area of Europe and China added together, were exposed by lowered sea levels at the last glacial maximum 21,000 years ago. While it's probably far-fetched to suppose that this is a very real increase of useful land that is referred to in the Yima story, or that has anything to do with the golden age that Yima benign rule supposedly achieved in Airavejo, it is interesting to note what happened next. After another immense span of time, we read Yima was summoned to a meeting place by the good river Data, where the god Ahura Mazda appeared to him bearing an ominous warning of a sudden and catastrophic climate change. And this is the quote: "O fair Yima, upon the material world the fatal winters are going to fall. That shall bring the fierce foul frost. Upon the material world the fatal winters are going to fall, that shall make snowflakes fall thick even on the highest tops of mountains." So very interesting. Within this text, there was a godlike figure who appeared to Yima and told him that there was a fatal winter was coming, just like he said there.
And I bet that god would have appeared to many different civilizations all over the world, like different groups of people, right? In a different form. What was that figure that kept appearing, like a similar type of figure coming out of the water? Was that on another podcast we did?
No, that was in Ancient Apocalypse as well.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
there's throughout many different cultures, there's always this telling of a person who comes either by ship, from the water, from the sky, and then is either the founder of civilization, the bringer of knowledge, or the bringer of doom, to tell that something's about to happen. So therefore, it continues to say, therefore make the Avara a hypogeum or underground enclosure, long as a riding ground on every side of the square, and thither bring the seeds of sheep and oxen, of men, of dogs, of birds, and of red blazing fires. Thither thou shalt bring the seeds of men and women of the greatest, best and finest on this earth. Thither shalt thou bring the seeds of every kind of cattle, the greatest, best, and finest kinds on this earth. Thither shall bring the seeds of every kind of tree, of the greatest, best, and finest kinds of this earth. Thither thou shalt bring the seeds of every kind of fruit, the fullest of food and sweetest of odor. All those seeds shalt thou bring, to every kind, to be kept inexhaustible there, so long as those men shall stay in the Vara. There shall be no humpbacked, none bulged forward there, no impotent, no lunatic, no leprous. So that's the basic idea, but it kind of reminds me of something. Does it remind you of anything? Kind of reminds me of the Noah's Ark story.
Yeah, it does.
Because it's like bring one of every animal.
Yeah, but it's not bring one, is it?
No, but it's
yeah,
bringing the
I was
seeds.
getting that vibe when you were telling me, but I also, I feel like bringing the finest of humans is like...
Well, you don't want to bring any diseased lunatics into your underground caverns, do you?
Well, I don't know.
I mean, the humpbacks, I can say, all right, sure, bring them. But, like, diseased people you don't want to bring because that'll just kill everyone.
Yeah, disease.
Lunatics will just go and murder everyone. Okay. You don't want to bring the crazies into an underground enclosed place. Leave them to die.
I don't know if I agree, but yeah, okay.
Okay. You have a rampant murderer rapist in your underground cavern.
I don't want that, but yeah, okay.
It makes sense. Survival. So, yeah, basically the underground hideaway in this text was to serve as a refuge from a terrible winter that was about to seize Ariana Vejo. A winter not for a single season, but a millennium.
Oh, God. So long.
As the Bundahish and other Zoroastrian texts inform us, the evil spirit sprang like a snake out of the sky down to the earth. He rushed in at noon, and thereby the sky was as shattered and frightened by him as a sheep by the wolf. So we can see this image of a serpent again falling from the sky. It's probably those comet trails that are, coming down to hit the earth. He came unto the water which was arranged below the earth, and then the middle of this earth was pierced and entered him. He rushed out upon the whole creation. He made the world quite as injured and dark at midday as though it were night. So, all of a sudden, this snake hits the earth, and then all of a sudden, it's so dark in the middle of the day when it's supposed to be the brightest that it looks like nighttime. And, this sounds a lot like what happened between the closing millennia of the last ice age around 12,800 years ago. So in this text, this ancient text, there is a description of someone coming and informing them that there's going to be a freezing period and that they should build an underground city and telling them what to do. I mean, that's pretty... That kind of points to everything.
Yeah, like why there's so many underground cities, and it would have got like this spirit and god-like figure would have gone, and I think given this message all over the world to all the different people, so that's why you see them all over the world, and like it's just like why would they? Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so, basically this theory is that 12,800 years ago, and it's not really a theory, there's evidence, a comet traveling on an orbit that took it through the inner solar system broke up into multiple fragments, and that many of these fragments, some more than a mile in diameter, hit the Earth with global cataclysmic events, an area of more than 50 million square kilometers stretching from North America in the west to Syria in the east was affected, and a vast cloud of dust was thrown into the upper atmosphere that enshrouded the earth, preventing the sun's rays from reaching the surface and thus initiating Younger Dryas. Ice Age. Go underground. So, sharp deep freeze lasted for 1,200 years until 11,600 years ago when the warming trend resumed. Global temperatures shot up again, and the remaining ice caps melted very suddenly, dumping all the water they contained into the oceans. So when the Zoroastrian text speaks of a fierce foul frost and of a fatal winter, it's probably them describing the conditions of the Younger Dryas period, and that they lived through that. And it's incredible to kind of start to think that humans really lived through that. And that we survived, but not just as like hunter-gatherers, we were a civilization at that point, and most of our history was lost due to this cataclysm, but we have traces of it around the world, and part of those traces are these underground cities that we use to protect ourselves. Yeah. So basically, in the Venedad, they remind us that the first of the good lands and countries were created by Ahura Mazda, and it could not resist the evil one. Thereupon came Angra Mainyu, who is all death, and the counter created by his witchcraft, the serpent in the river, and winter, a work of the demons. Now there are 10 winter months there, 2 summer months, and these are cold for the waters, cold for the earth, cold for the trees. Winter falls there with the worst of its plagues. In other translations, the phrase the serpent in the river and winter is given as a great serpent and winter, and alternatively as a mighty serpent and snow. So there is this repeated metaphor being presented that a mighty serpent sprung from the sky down to the earth, penetrated the earth, and brought a prolonged winter upon the world, so dark at midday that even the fleeting summer months were too cold for human life. And if we think about it, the oldest, known remains of us were 200,000 years ago. And if we were kind of stupid hunter-gatherers at that time, how would we have survived this period? How would we have survived this global extinction event? This cataclysmic, electric shock. This cataclysmic event. So this theory is that these underground cities were built to survive this, and that several countries and cultures all over the world did so.
Yeah, and they could not possibly have been just hunter-gatherers doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot more we could go into, but basically that's, you can read into the Zoroastrian texts for yourself. We kind of just wanted to push that theory forward and have it out there. And yeah, it's really cool and very cool to think of a civilization that existed, that we've lost a lot of ancient history and knowledge. And who were these bringers of knowledge, these, starters of civilization who came to kind of help and inform us, like that they have some interest in us, that they wanted to protect us, in some way, that they wanted us to preserve the human line and life on Earth, not just humans, but animals too.
Yeah. Who knows, what that was. Could be gods, aliens, anything. But it's just so interesting, to dive into this subject of underground cities. And I think it definitely, shows that we have a lot more history to dive into, to unfold, to rediscover than what we know. Yeah. Definitely have advanced civilization in our past that I do believe in the future will be confirmed at some point.
Yeah.
I just think it's just being withheld right now, and how slow a lot of this stuff takes to come out and be moved forward. So yeah, it's just such an interesting subject. I loved finding out about these underground cities. We hope that you enjoyed the episode with us as well, guys.
Yeah, it's really cool, and definitely go see, there's so many more underground cities out there if you guys are interested in that. Just there's a lot to look into, a lot of cover-ups, a lot of places that you've never heard of before. And I'm really excited. I just really like the theory that it just makes more sense to me that they needed to create a permanent solution. The people of the past needed to create a permanent solution to and they needed to live generation after generation within this spot. It wasn't just to protect from invaders for a certain amount of time, but it was to create a new way of life. And the sheer magnitude of this and the sheer amount of resources and technical know-how that went into creating these things is, points to much more advanced civilization than we originally thought.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially it's in such close proximity to Göbekli Tepe and all these ancient sites that were around at the time. And Göbekli Tepe is one of our oldest archaeological find that we can carbon date. And hopefully there will come some conclusive evidence that the Cappadocia network was, maybe we can find something that could date it back to the theory that it was from the Ice Age and the end of the Younger Dryas. But until then, we can just continue to stay open and curious.
Yeah, and I definitely don't think this will be the last episode we do where we're like, sort of diving into like hidden structures from our past, like underground
maybe
ones.
Underwater next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast. We really enjoyed starting to do these videos and give a visual for you guys. We got a fly kind of bothering us around.
Yeah, he's attacking our faces.
But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, then subscribe. We're pushing out content every week.
Yeah.
And if you guys want more, then go and check our audio episodes, which we have a link in the description to that, and you can listen to it on whatever favorite platform you like.
Yeah, and make sure to like, subscribe. That really helps us, or leave reviews on the audio platforms. Yeah, it all really helps, and we love doing this. And comment below in the video if you're watching. We do love to hear your comments.
Yeah. Really
and your
fun.
thoughts on these subjects. Let's get a conversation started.
Yeah, so thank you guys, and we will see you next week for another strange and magical dive into the unknown.
Yeah. Bye, until next time.